She starts out with me, but then she
Can't hold everything on her lap.
No, it's hard to balance a glass of water. You can balance this with your real skill. And engineer, IR at the end. Yeah.
Just not an ouch-near. All right. Well, we'll just, since you're here on time, we should start pretty much on time. Those that aren't here on time, well, that's why we try and get you here on time.
Suffer the consequence.
Exactly. So I never know what to say about anyone. My name is Steve Sepkin. I'm with the Humanities Iowa. And I've been trying really hard for the last 11 years to get an interest in Voices from the Prairie so that we can celebrate Iowa writers and what it means to be a writer in the state of Iowa. And I could talk about that forever, but I always try and choose a great role model for that theme, which Loree is exactly the kind of person that we like to celebrate. Because if you leave here today, I always hope that people will leave and go, you know, it's possible to be a writer in Iowa. So if you meet some grandchildren or some friends or yourself and you've thought to yourself all along that, you know, maybe, I'd like to be a writer, but I'm sure I won't get any money for that, so I probably shouldn't pursue that. But the funny thing about me introducing these events is that I always get to say my real job is a book publisher. And so, in reality, I actually do make most of my money on selling books and working with writers. Not all of them live in Iowa, but a lot of them do. And so I know that it actually is possible. It's not the easiest thing in history, but it is possible. And so it just seems there's a long tradition of writing in Iowa and success in our state. And so that's the reason why we keep doing this Voices from the Prairie, is to celebrate our writers. And my thing is role model. I just want you to know that it's possible. So tell people that it can be done. And you're not really, I'm a little bit weird, but I'm not that weird. So we don't all turn out bad. So this year, we were lucky enough to have Loree Rackstraw, who I had met earlier at an event in Cedar Falls before. And Chris Rossi at Humanities Iowa recommended you. He said, I heard about this writer at Cedar Falls who wrote this new book. I'm Kurt Vonnegut. And I have a soft spot for Kurt Vonnegut, like many of you probably do. He was probably the first real book that I read, I guess, other than what I was assigned to read in school. And I discovered this thing called Slaughterhouse-Five and Cat's Cradle, and I was like, wow, this is really great. And then I read this fascinating collection of short stories on, I instantly blocked it out, the Monkey House short stories, and that's not totally this title of the book. But, and so I became captivated by Kurt Vonnegut, and I didn't know that I'd later be meeting one of his friends at all. Never crossed my mind. And so, in some ways for me, it's kind of taking it full circle. Here I am introducing someone that's going to be talking some about one of my first idols in the world of writing. And I didn't realize at the time that he'd lived in Iowa City and that he had been in Iowa for a period of time. It was later on that everyone would say, oh, there's the Kurt Vonnegut house up on the end of the street in Iowa City. And it's like, you mean that Kurt Vonnegut? He really lived in Iowa City for a while? And so, the influence of Iowa with writing is pretty immense. As I often think of the Writer's Workshop, but to me that's just barely even a tip of the writing history in our state. I will now do the formal introduction of Loree, which I'll read all about her. Loree Rackstraw has taught fiction writing, literature, mythology, and humanities at the University of Northern Iowa for 30 years, and has also served as fiction editor and reviewer for the North American Review. Since retiring, she has been working on a number of writing projects, including this memoir, based on her long friendship with Kurt Vonnegut. She studied with Vonnegut at the Writer's Workshop at the University of Iowa prior to joining the UNI faculty. And with that, we'll let her speak. And I know
Thank you, Steve.
You'll allow questions at the end to a certain
When When did you come to Iowa? Have you always lived here a long
I was
time?
telling Michael, I was born in Detroit, but I think since I can't remember the first 3 years of my life, really, I don't think it really counts. So I lived in Iowa City probably from age 3 until
Okay.
20 or so.
Wow.
Okay, so 1969 through 82
Okay.
or so.
And you were born,
I know, you were probably there.
lots, no.
When were you at
I was at the workshop, is that what you mean?
a writer's workshop?
Yeah, from 64 to 66.
My mother attended
Is that right?
the
Her name?
Wilma Clements. She's published 2 poetry. She's not living. Wilma Clements.
That somehow is familiar to me. When, you don't remember when she would have done the workshop?
She was 66. She was born in 1906.
1906?
She was born 1906. She was born. She was, I believe she was.
Well, yeah, probably.
No, she was 61.
Yeah.
It probably was 69 or 68.
Yeah.
I mean, she was a mature woman.
Yeah. I was a mature woman too when I was
Yeah.
there.
Were you at the workshop when Vance Bergeli was there?
I was indeed. He and his wife were very good friends of mine. Yeah, Vance was teaching at the same time Kurt was. They were friends. And I just spoke with Tina. In fact, she was now in Clive with her daughter.
Well, Vance is remarried, as you know,
Yes.
and that did not please Kurt at all. He wanted to come to New York, and he told him, Kurt Vonnegut told him he could stay in his apartment in New York, but he couldn't, quote, bring that whore out to the...
Well,
To
that
the
might
shore
have
with
been
him.
that might have been a way of affectionate.
You cut the gist of the conversation. I get it. Meaning his second wife, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yasmin is her name.
Who?
His second wife's name is Yasmin.
Yes. I knew her, actually. She was a student in the workshop when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, there, it is what it is, right? In fact, Vance was back visiting his wife and daughter just in the last couple of weeks.
I run into
He's
Philip.
quite ill, but his...
I run into Philip every once in a
Yeah,
while.
right, in Iowa City, yeah. He's doing very well as a writer, too, as you probably know.
Vance stayed at my home several times, several weeks at a time.
When he came back to visit, or...
Here in Clinton, I just came out to
Oh,
visit.
yeah, sure, of course, yeah.
His first wife used to buy her cars here in Clinton.
Did she?
Mhm.
She may have one of those yet. She drives a very large Cadillac, I think it is.
Yeah, I stumbled into Tina when I'm in Iowa City
Yeah.
quite a bit.
She's now in Clive. So, and her daughter's husband works in the airport. He's the comptroller, I think, of the flight pattern system. That kind of thing. So you want to say hello to her. She's glad to hear from you, I'm sure. She's a dear friend and a really great woman. Okay, well anyway, anybody else have any recollections of workshop people? Okay. So I'm glad to know that some of you do know about the workshop, maybe most of you, and some of the people from that workshop, which was a very, I should say, instrumental and very powerful influence upon my life, for sure. And I'm really glad to hear that there are some Vonnegut fans here as well. I'd like to share some thoughts about him today. I have written out this paper, so I will just read from it if you don't mind, and that way be maybe to remember what I'm talking about. My memory is getting worse all the time, and I'm not at all pleased about it. I'd also like to share some personal experiences about our state of Iowa and my impressions and experiences in it, and how great it is for writers to live and work here. Driving down here, incidentally, today was like driving through a Grand Wood Canyon. My goodness, it was beautiful. The corn was just stunning, and some of the fields are cut and see these fields loaded with that golden corn. It was very impressive. And Kurt would have loved seeing that too. He really did like Iowa a lot. When I was thinking back upon my life for this talk, one of my earliest memories was about being in Miss Farr's kindergarten class. That's age 5, and I can't dredge up much before that. So when you get to be my age, maybe you ought to write down your life at age 3. In Forest City, this was. And she